Sure what's happening there. Yeah. Good morning, guys. You're on Postman Productions or Ben's World, so just find the Google site. Just go Ben's World Postman Productions should come up. Okay, so coming into the chase. Yesterday, or yes, that's right, the 30th, I noticed a report was sent in to me from Meteorite Eyewitness. This is a site that I actually quite regularly follow. It's really good for basically getting an idea about what people are seeing out there. It was quite strange because I'd actually commented in the past that I hadn't been getting that website since around about the end of September. It just wasn't updating on my browser. As soon as I got this report, went in there, yep, back on as normal. So what that's all about, I have no idea. Um, but that had basically screens and screens and screens of people reporting seeing a meteorite, basically kind of travelling from a north to south direction. Seeing a lot of it focused, witness reports concentrated around Christchurch, but the other end of the spectrum was seen up around basically Whangarei ways. That's as far as travelling in a basically north east direction from south to well, southwest to northeast as far as I can discern. So I took that on board and went away and did things, and I came back this morning, and I'm sorry, I should say that at the same time when I was looking around for that, kind of doing my little search pattern, I noticed that in Colorado there's been over basically about 2 days, 27th, 28th, a lot of mainstream local syndicate net radios and television networks have been reporting on the sighting of what they are calling drones. And these are basically, when I say the word UFO, I always mean the emphasis on the U, unidentified, but about anywhere between 25 to packs of 40 of these drones flying around and apparently operating in a what they described as a search pattern. Thought that was a bit odd, but didn't really pay too much attention to it. Moseyed on, did bits and pieces. This morning I went back, and sure enough, there is another wave of meteorites has been seen over New Zealand. Quite a lot actually. And I broke down the patterns, and they actually effectively worked into three groups, which was a 6 p.m. sighting, which was not seen in New Zealand but in the UK, which was these drone, or basically similar patterns to what we've seen in Denver and Colorado, which are these drones, UFOs. Then we saw another pattern at around 11 o'clock, which was New Zealand. And then we saw one at about 4 a.m., which was again, the 11 o'clock one was a large singular meteorite. And then at about 4 a.m. we started getting reports of basically these similar things that match up to what we're seeing in the UK and Colorado, described as drones, between 20 to 40 of these particular critters. I have actually think I've seen stuff like this myself in Wanaka years and years ago, and of course because I'm not seeing them directly, it's hard to be clear. I did actually think at one point that because we've been testing from Rocket Lab, they've been the last flight was a thing called running out of fingers, and the idea was that this was a thing that flew a satellite up in the sky and it released all these little balls, and they lit up like an artificial meteorite display, which was used for rich people's parties, but it can also be used for like effectively laying out down a when a little small bit of metal travels around in space very fast, it basically travels about the speed of a bullet. So effectively, you put those in the right place, you can actually use them to wipe out people's satellites. So it's not just a ooh-ah display; it's effectively a little minefield layer as well at the same time. So in case you're paying any attention, the Cold War in space is getting kind of hot, and there's people virtually seems like every week there's a new toy being deployed out there, and everyone's in very much a testing phase at the moment. I thought it might have been these, but by the description of them, they're quite low flying, which kind of matches up more with what we're seeing in Colorado and Denver. So I went back again a little bit to Meteorite. I witnessed a really good sight, by the way. Like anything, unfortunately, when it does tend to be successful news, it tends to get scrubbed off the internet. I used to look a lot for things like sonic booms was another description I used to find, because and again, that was from the algorithms that I realised it was things that people look for, and that became something that they made harder to find. You had to go into chat rooms to find those specific tills. But I went back and I followed basically from around about the New Zealand viewpoint of the We had the 30th, the 29th, and the 28th and the 27th. We also have reports of basically activity in the sky. The 28th is very much following the same time. It's at 11 o'clock. And it's described as again these. I think it's the again link on the link. I've broken it down into set patterns. I've done it very raw. I haven't really done a lot of typo improving, so I just wanted to get the damn thing actually out because of speed necessity. But I think it was about 11 o'clock, and those were in the drones. And then the last group was the 27th, which was sighted in 2 locations, North and South Island, a singular ball again around. I think about the well, actually I take that back because the one in the South Island was seen about 9:30, and then a second incident was seen at around 11 o'clock on the North Island. One of the events describes seeing a bright blue flash, which is very similar to anyone that's been aware of what's being described in mainstream press when they finally acknowledge it was happening as earthquake, lightning in Christchurch, and also seen in the Kaikoura. You'll actually find video and clippage footage out. It also matches up very much with what we're seeing in Japan and other locations as well. So, as I said in the past, there's 50,000 earthquakes occur a year. Around about 5% of these are 7 plus. And since around about 2004, which is the Indonesian tsunami, we've been finding that a lot of these 7 plus earthquakes have actually come with their own distinct electromagnetic anomaly, which has been more and more of interest to different governments. You've seen the French out there, the Chinese, and various governments have actually been putting their satellites in place because they're kind of curious, and they've got they probably think the same thing I am, which is somebody's playing with things that they shouldn't be playing with. And so yeah, so basically these are a precursor, potential precursor, and I stress that word potential, to seismic activity. Previously, on the last couple of days, I've been putting out infrared photos of Australia and Tasman, or New Zealand Australian area. 3 things I've kind of noticed was, one was that we start off with actually Anthony Gray. Thank you very much, Professor Gray. He noticed clouds over New Zealand about the day before Christmas Day, about thereabouts. And when you looked at the photos, what was distinctly interesting about them was that the cloud level around them had distinct triangle sharp patterns. So in other words, nothing natural. These were a man-made pattern which comes about from as the heat of the signature occurs. It's literally melting the water, so it leaves like an imprint like you would find footprint in the snow. When I coordinated and looked at those locations, we had one as Deep Cove, which is Deep Cove, if you look at Investigate magazine, for example, makes reference to me talking about how submarines were seen back then. It also has local fishing reporting this area. There's been long, since the 1970s, they wanted to put a HARP-related area there, and there's been lots of activity in that whole area for donkey's years. In fact, I know when the Five Eyes guys came over to Queenstown a few years ago, they sent off a sub-team off down to out towards that way, and when I actually got picked up by one of the person that I was staying with, which is how I found out about it, so quizzing about it, she got very, very tight-lipped. So yeah, there's definitely activity going out there, and always has been for a long time. I've even done articles in the mountain scene talking about these jet black aircraft. C-130 Hercules came out of, I think, the 23rd Special Squadron, according to my Les G, who kind of did the backtracking information. We ran that in the mountain scene, and it was done so because the editor at the time, Frank Marvin, had seen them, and they'd also been seen by a local police officer, Police Stone. So they had no problems running that article because they knew actually that it was real. They'd seen them. We also did a backtrack them back to Operation Deep Freeze for information, which of course they denied. And then they gave us lots of silly argument, replies, which, the thing about the significance of these things was that they were painted in kind of the same radar paint that you'd see with the stealth bomber, and not a single distinct remark on, not even where the fuel ghosts would go, but always heading out towards that Deep Cove area, which about a year beforehand, you'll also notice there was a mass whale stranding in that same exact spot. I previously had talked to Paul Buchanan, which I think I had him on Radio 1, which is the Otago University radio station. We talked briefly about that, where he acknowledged that he'd actually spoken to captains who'd been on submarines in that area. So what I'm basically saying is that area is a known area. The other area was Norfolk Island, which again we've got a series of micro dishes there, which again, if not today or haven't been, I'll give you the full background data, but yeah, there's a whole big micro additional there. And then the third one was the Chatham Islands, which is obviously got the Rocket Lab relay stations there, but it's also got the HOP1 and the HOP2 Boyer HARP monitoring buoys that went in there. A lot of that stuff that refers to Canterbury University carrying out HARP experiments. All the documents that are actually out there have now largely scrubbed that actually offline. However, and again, if you look through my pages, you'll find them. I've got things like the logo patches, and I've got newspaper articles. So again, I can confirm what I'm saying from having actually managed to keep track and know that that was going to get scrubbed. So you know, nice try, guys. But yeah, I made sure my documentation was solid on this one. We covered all the bases. Oh yeah, so going back to the Fiordland area, we had a lot of seismic activity. Always a bit of a worry there because number one, it sort of acts like when you're playing pool and you fire it down, it goes from there and travel. You know, it's the point which travels up the fault line. So anything that happens here is always a precursor a week or so later. Something's been happening there, so I've been sort of monitoring that for about a week, which is when we saw this actually first occurring. Number two is the geology on that area. So it actually connects to the North Island. So when you, say, for example, take Taranaki, yeah, that's right, Mount Taranaki, the strata which it actually sits on follows down the North Island, crosses the South Island, travels down the rim of the West Coast, and stops basically at that sort of Te Ao area. So again, anything that happens there kind of literally gets, like a hard, shock of the arm, travels up the arm into that particular point. Number three is we'd also taken footage right after the White Island explosion, and while we had lots of obviously sulfur clouds that showed up on the maps as pink colour around the Coromandel White Island area as you expect, we were also seeing little small plumes of that little pink sulfur base in that Fiordland area. So it's an area which has been actually on our radar because of unusual anomalies and activity in that area for the last 2 weeks. Number three, we turned around and also looked at this cloud source. They kind of banked from, going off memory now, again, obviously I'm not going to be able to do it today because I'm on road travel, so you're just going to either have to wait for the links there or go and do your own research. But it basically banked from Fiordland and went left out across the Australian area, and I traced that back. It did a very sharp L shape, was again that not naturally occurring. I won't put it in the same context as the triangle. Triangle was distinctly, it was nice sharp edges. There was no room for interpretation. That was a man-made object. The cloud levels, just open subject. I would say that they was unnatural. Other people with great experience might say otherwise. But the point was I tracked that cloud level across. I tracked it to Macquarie Island and out towards Australia. Two things I found interesting about that was as I travelled across that and got to Macquarie Island, the cloud layer over around Macquarie Island area actually had a distinct ripple effect. So again, it's like that thing of when you put on a microwave dish and you put it over water, and the Pacific beams are going to melt that area because they make it hotter, so that's going to leave that footprint in the snow imprint, and that's what you're seeing basically that's towards Tasman to Macquarie Island. Macquarie Island again is well known for me. It's got the sister HARP station to what you have in Arrow Bay down on Bluff, which is basically it's the directional finder. So the one in Birdling Flats manages altitude, and so they use it to measure the temperature there. So between the two of them, they get it just right. So one goes latitude and one goes longitude, and the one in Macquarie Island does exactly the same situation. So they're part of the targeting system. There's also been the area noted as an electrical anomaly exactly a week to the date to the hour of the Indonesian earthquake in 2004, which occurred just basically not long after HOP1's buoy just switched off beforehand. Again, an area which I became very, very interested in. This is how I kind of got into it because of all these sonic mass eye reports of eyeball fireballs and sonic booms, which started off with me seeing reports in Dunedin. Tracked them up back in the day when you could do that and they weren't paying attention. Up to Jakarta, big huge cluster area there. And when we basically looked at the earthquake occurred, what effectively occurred was you had the electromagnetic anomaly travelled up via Macquarie Island to an area just below the epicenter centre, and then the shockwave or the actual fault line occurred what goes above there, just above it, so it was sort of smack bang in between the middle of them. Um, and that's when I started looking into it. Of course, to me, it matched a lot of the reports or Maasai reports that were seen in Australia in 1993. The best stuff, if you want to find out about the Australian event, is go and read an article in Nexus magazine, which I think it's called Bright Sky. It's either Henry or Harry Mason. He reads all the political background stuff there. And I will go maybe into that another day, because I have covered ad nauseum, and I'm just sort of giving you a quick recap. But basically what I'm saying is we were seeing the same symptoms occurring again. And the other thing about the Harry Mason case was that Mason was a geologist, and his findings actually sparked off two separate investigations about the use of electromagnetic weaponry. One was in Australia, which was reported as inconclusive, and the second one was in the United States, which was hosted by Sam Nunn, who then went on to have the Symposium on Weapons of Mass Destruction keynote speaker William Cohen, who basically gives a very famous speech about the existence of weather, or what I call geo warfare. That original script actually used to use the word cult in it. When I mentioned this on the Vinnie Eastwood show afterwards, that script was a modified, which can be found in the Pentagon script, so the word cult was taken out. And you, as you look through a lot of the stuff, you can see there's been a discerning attempt to basically undermine what Harry Mason's occurred. But if you go back to the beginnings and you trace it through, then basically from what he's saying and the events afterwards, he's vindicated. Again, anyone wants to have an argument with me, yeah, I'll happily do that, because I've studied this a long time and know exactly the politics and which people were involved in it. Going back to Australia though, Macquarie Island, I also did a lot of research on that after I found that little pattern there. It's actually an area where basically clouds that's hanging off Australia, so it's cut along story short, there's a lot of experimentation being done on Macquarie. Again, I've already got all the links on my Facebook page. I've been already kind of working towards this direction when I saw what I saw today. What they were actually looking at was technology which doesn't actually create rain, it actually stops rain. So I find that very interesting. A lot of that was to use with radars, and that also led me into the use of rockets, or rocket sounding, which again, when we go back to Rocket Lab, and their 7th launch was actually called Rainmaker. And you start to kind of cross-reference the companies involved in it, and they're all interrelated. And what I'm basically saying to you is that when we start to look at these places with these abnormal cloud patterns or things occurring, it's a case of when you go, oh, well, that's interesting, and you lift up the rock, and when you find what's on the ground, is you find these particular hard military or military industrial assets owned by specific companies involved in that particular research. And the technology in question is that specific technology that will if you want to conduct experimentations into that part of the ionosphere or onto that project, that's what you would need. So it's what I always say, it doesn't matter what weapon you're using, whether it's a pea shooter or a nuclear bomb. when you go to a certain place and you find the same personnel, the same military, same money trail, the same hardware, then it's not. It's a good sign that you got a sniper in the bush. And this is what we're finding is it's going to, oh, what's that flash in the bush, and then going there and find, oh look, oh my God, it's not just a mirror glinting off the sun. It's actually a guy in a camouflage dress with a long, So it's not just. Basically, what I'm saying to you is that we are finding hard evidence at these spots that we're looking at. That's similar also to what you go look at Chatham Islands. There's a lot of stuff happening out there weather-wise at the moment. Really worth having a big scrub and play all around that area there, because there's lots of interesting things happening on Chatham Islands. I think that will do for today. Just very quickly round up, guys, don't panic. The world's going to do what the world's going to do, but it doesn't hurt if you can make sure you've got some baked beans in the cupboard, some cans, candles, first aid kit. Make sure your car's full of gas. Have a rendezvous point for where your families can actually meet, and stay safe out there. At the end of the day, more and more of us are becoming aware that the version of news on the 6 o'clock news is not exactly actually how it happens in the world. We don't have all the answers, we're not all experts, but collectively, when we come together, I think we've got a better picture of actually discerning what's happening than waiting for the press release from the government. It's never going to actually occur. You look at things like the Epstein story, collectively we've all, that was a story that online and social media broke. So for all the media's bashing of online and social media, You know, see, we're not experts, but collectively our minds together can, you know, through trial and error, actually work out the bigger picture and discern what the common theme is, and that, you know, pretty much gives us, if you pay attention to what the common hood of what everyone's saying, you'll be pretty much on target towards finding out what's going on. I think that's actually is what's starting to happen around New Zealand and Australia. We are starting to realise that we are being seriously fucked with. In Australia, a lot of this to do is with control of the water supplies. In New Zealand, it's also to do with control of water supplies, and obviously, you know, also creation of food monopolisations, land grabs, and also for both Australia and New Zealand, a lot of the guys that, when you trace them back to, you know, who's writing the checks, you get to oil and mining companies. I will go back to the drones very, very quickly. What I should have said was that what I looked at was, it reminded me of an article that I wrote years ago about a company that I found in the United Kingdom, which, believe it or not, their name actually is Skynet. A United Kingdom company that was working on doing basically running drones using an AI program, which is very big at the moment. All of the drill and military drills have gone out at the moment. You pay attention to them; they're not just about cyber drills; they're about AI specifically. And these things were looking at basically running packs that could triage the target. So again, when you're talking about the Colorado, and they're talking about these things with flying a search pattern, that would fit in very nicely with that concept that these were drones. And the company that was used in the UK experiment was it was called Skynet. That company in 2016 started carrying out trials or operating in Afghanistan. There's a WikiLeaks, I think it was Edward Snowden report, showing the fact that these things were running amok. They were killing up to thousands of people were being killed as a result. I put a link there as again on that website. And so these are things that came to mind when we people started seeing reports of these mass drones occurring after the event of these fireballs. So, you know, effectively what we're looking at, I think, is a bit of a weapons test. They're playing with new toys. So, you know, you look at a lot of the AI systems and suits that have gone out around Australia and around, you know, Denver, of course, obviously, as we've got Cheyenne Mountain. So the areas that you're citing these are in areas where we know that they are, you know, that they are hubs of the military industrial complex. So we shouldn't be really that surprised. Yeah, I think that's pretty much enough for you guys to go on. So, you know, happy New Year's Eve. Stay safe out there. And I think, you know, I think 2020. I'm reasonably hopeful that we're just going for a test phase at this stage. I think 2020 for them is a year of consolidation and getting their pieces in place. So I don't think we're going to have the same roller coaster as 2019. I say that for one real reason, that New Zealand is a election year, so they're kind of got to behave themselves. Although in saying that, I've always said that, you know, Jacinda Ardern wants to get a second term, so they will be trying to push our emotional heartstrings to make sure that we vote in the direction that they guide us. Okay, guys, take care and keep the faith, whatever your faith may be.